another video feature of the Immersive World's Handbook. I am back at Universal Studios in Singapore, and behind me you might see the attraction at the New York City theme land. It's called Lights, Camera, Action. I wanted to take you inside this attraction and talk about it for its significance as a combination of movie and theme park ride. And I have to give some shout outs and props to my colleague in theme park studies, Florian Freitag, who's done quite a bit of research and writing on this topic of the intermediality between movies and between theme park rides. And I want to show you, I was able to just get a few photos and very brief video. But basically the ride involves two sections, a queuing area, and at first, and this is where Steven Spielberg comes in and talks about movie magic, and at first I thought that was the only part of the ride, and I was kind of let down a little bit, but that's a queuing area, and then it leads into this second area, which I would, as reference points, combine or talk about the backstage tour of Universal that you may have experienced at Universal City, or Universal Studios Hollywood, excuse me. And also, there's a stage show, I forget the name of it, but they basically show you the basics of blue and green screen technologies. And in a sense, this attraction has both of those features. But let me show you a brief look inside the ride, which culminates in a hurricane disaster that has fire, heat, so a lot of multi-sensory experiences. But let's go inside and take a brief look at that ride. So right here, I want to talk about Citation, and you're actually looking at the queue line for Lights, Camera, Action at Universal Studios Singapore. And a common feature of many Universal theme parks will be rides like this, including queue lines that advertise various movies. And what I found to be somewhat curious about this queue line is that in a sense, they were just directly using Citation to establish a connection with the guests. But the curious thing here is that these many movies mentioned here, either stylistically, technologically, in terms of storyline or narrative, had very little to do with the actual experience in the ride, which basically, to sum it up, was a disaster-type movie set in which the guests experienced shaking and visceral aspects, feeling the heat of fire, a rain, water, a flood, and so forth. And so the curious thing here, of course, is the idea is that you're citing the movies, but they don't necessarily directly connect to the experiences that the guests will have in the actual theme park ride. Here is an image of Universal Studios Hollywood, and I wanted to show you this because I think one of the things that these parks do in terms of referencing cinema is to suggest, of course, their entire foundation, their entire existence, their reason for being is based on the movies. And I think this says something much about how popular cinema film is around the world in terms of the billions of dollars that is spent on it and also that is made on it in terms of profits after the fact. The next set of images I would like to share with you come from the city of Berlin. And I happened to be walking around the city and stumbled across this hotel, the Hollywood Hotel. And what I find curious about this is the fact that they're using associations with Hollywood, and as you'll see from the images, very general or non-specific associations. And thus I would suggest to you that another side of this connection of the theme park and cinema is all of the notions of lifestyle, the values, the sense of living that is connected to the ideals of cinema and, of course, more specifically here, the ideals of Hollywood. And as you can see in these images, in a sense, they have just a random selection of celebrities and movies that are placed in the various common areas of this hotel in Berlin, hopefully, I guess, making connections with the guests in terms of what they might expect of cinema and the movies. And now we're actually back at Universal Studios in Singapore, and this is the Hollywood section of the park, and I wanted to show you this because this is another side of the lifestyle association. So not just the films and the actors and actresses or the production processes, but all of the norms and context that we can connect to the idea of Hollywood or filmmaking. So in this case, it's a bit of glamour and also a bit of vanity that is being poked fun at. And also, of course, here you see the iconic Hollywood Walk of Fame from Universal Studios Singapore, which also has its very important associations worldwide that people have with this connection of movies and Hollywood. I wanted to also show you an image or a series of images from Bubba Gump's, which is a famous chain based on the iconic Forrest Gump movie. And this is actually from Universal City Walk, just outside the Universal Studios theme park there. And I think what is curious about the Bubba Gump restaurants is the fact that they're using these direct references, allusions to Hollywood cinema, specifically the Forrest Gump movie, and they're doing a couple of things. Of course, they're reminding us of the branding of associations that we might have with this film. They are also connecting us to the experiences in the film, famous quotes and so forth. And then thirdly, they're using all of these associations to further make connections to us through design choices. And what I found to be very curious here is the fact that they use the phrase "run, Forrest, run," or the opposite, "stop, Forrest, stop," as a way of getting the guests to get the attention of the server at the various tables there. Now, the next area I would like to focus on is the idea of production or special effects, and this will somewhat overlap with the next area, which is the idea of experiencing the movies and going behind the scenes. And so I specifically came across this attraction, Lights, Camera, Action, just near the entrance of the park here at Universal Studios Singapore, and I wanted to include this as part of this feature. And actually initially this was my main focus, was primarily on this feature, and then as I thought about it more, I discovered that indeed there are multiple ways in which theme parks and cinema or film tend to converge. So the setup of the ride here, I'll get to in a second, but you can see just a bit of the video here. Ironically enough, they didn't want us filming or taking videos, so I took that on the sly. But you can actually see here that there's a warning, and the warning speaks to this idea that you'll be experiencing real Hollywood movie-based effects, and they can be very jarring to the guest. And basically the scenario is, after going through the queue line, another waiting area, is that you're part of a production movie set, and it's similar to what I'll show you in a second, the behind-the-scenes tour is like at Universal Studios Hollywood and some other parks. And so the idea here is you have a one set or one scene version of this. The guest is in a coastal town, I think it is, and they see this ship, and then throughout this minor story that they tell, you experience waves, you experience shaking, very, very loud sounds, which I found to be quite deafening. You also experience fire and some of the water spraying in the back of this ship. So it's a very central, multi-sensory experience that the guest gets in terms of this cinematic experience. And here then I'm back out front, and you can see the entrance to Lights, Camera, Action, the theme park attraction. And the next important area here is this idea of experiencing the movies, particularly by going behind the scenes. This image here is from Universal Studios Hollywood, and this is one of many such images you might see, which is basically a movie backdrop, and it gives the guests a sense of illusion, and of course it makes a great place to take selfies or social media pictures. And one of the things I think that has become quite popular in certainly Universal theme parks is this notion of writing the movies. And as you'll see here in just a bit from the guidebook from Universal Studios Singapore, this is very much stressed. And the idea here is that the guests then can somehow take part in an experience that they wouldn't normally be able to take part in. And I think in a sense it's akin to learning the secret behind a magic trick. You're awed with the illusion, and then after the fact you have this desire to learn this notion, the idea of how did they do it. And so in the case of a lot of these rides at Universal or other movie-based theme parks, you get the sense that the immersion is not just experiencing a direct experience in a ride, but it's somehow going behind the scenes and seeing how things are done through the magic of movie making. And here then, kind of the epitome of the behind-the-scenes rides would be the Universal Studios tour. And this is images, a set of images from the Hollywood version of this. Again, the idea is that you're going to see iconic moments in movie history recreated for you, and you're actually going to also see places where real movies or sitcoms or reality TV shows like The Voice in the case of the studio tour here are filmed. You also get to see famous memorabilia, cars from shows like Magnum PI and so forth. So it extends this intertextuality, if you will, of the cinema. And again, here we have an example of a very visceral connection of cinema and theme park rides in terms of creating the associations of a disaster scene. And here is another experience, a show at Universal Studios in Hollywood, where they also try to show you behind the scenes everything from green screen technologies, motion capture, many examples. Actually, the show itself, I thought, verged a little bit on corny, but this could be the fact that they were trying to emphasize a family show that could be experienced by all age groups. But the notion here is that you've seen so many movies in your life, now you get a chance to experience how those movies are made. And I would say to some extent they are successful in showing you very simply how production is done. Of course, no one thinks that this is even close to the levels of sophistication and technology that is involved in today's big budget movies. But it tends to be fun and participatory, I think, for the audience. And what they do then is invite various families or individuals up on stage, and they take part in these various scenes, as you'll see here in a second. So first we have the green screen, and I think people might be aware of some of these technologies today. In fact, in terms of mobile apps, you can do fairly sophisticated things if you happen to have a green screen and an iPhone or tablet device. So further examples here of things like force perspective and other technologies that allow you to create illusions through the magic of cinema. And some of this, I think, again, gets quite fun in terms of the experiences that the guest is able to see here. And actually now we move from the production side of cinema and theme parks into the area of intermedia and transmediality. And this refers to the idea that we are having, if you will, a give and take between the various media forms as they're developed in the worlds of theme parks and in the worlds of cinema or film. So I'll take you here back to Universal Studios Singapore to Faraway World, which I sort of informally might call Shrek World, because the entirety of this theme land, like many others at Universal Singapore, is based on the movie Shrek. And so what you'll see here is not a behind-the-scenes tour, but guests sit in a movie theater, and it's a so-called 4D experience. So you have the immersion of the cinema combined with the 3D glasses, and then the fourth dimension is air, shaking of seats, and also water. So you can see a little bit of that experience here. And a lot of this is designed certainly for families, and I think it gives families, particularly children, a safe sense of immersion. It did get, I would say, somewhat tiring having the exact same fourth dimensional effects occurring one by one, one after another.
Oh, what's wrong, Princess? You shouldn't be this unhappy until years into the marriage.
It's happy. My life.
Oh, let me guess.
Just
Overwhelmed by love.
no.
Opportunity, I think, in this feature to focus on the idea of the relationship of movies to theme parks, as I've mentioned, and actually a few other video features I've done here and in other spaces. And so the premise behind this ride, as you'll see in some of the videos, you enter into a queuing area, and and that's basically just waiting for the next group of people to finish the attraction. And the attraction is you sit in a traditional movie theater and you wear 3D glasses. And the 4D part of this, if you go back to some of the early rides like the Alien Encounter ride back in the day, I'm trying to remember if Captain EO had any of these extra sensory dimensions, but basically you wear 3D glasses, you sit in seats, the seats move around, kind of like in the US we have the D-Box technology where there's a syncing between the movie itself and the seats moving. And also then there's other elements. You get some air, water, not as much water as they have on the rides at Universal Studios Hollywood, which is nice and cooling on a hot Singapore day like this. You also have some sound and some minor lighting effect. And I think, you know, what's interesting about rides like this is the realization of an effort that you can combine movies with theme park rides. And of course, Universal is a theme park company that's based on this notion of you can ride movies, and so it makes a lot of sense. This particular ride, beyond the 3D, which didn't seem stellar to me, I thought for kids, for young people, did offer some thrills in stressing that four-dimensional aspect. And I think in a sense you could say that rides like this and theme park experiences that focus on extrasensory dimensions are anticipating the future of rides, the future of movies. So in a sense there's a synergy that we see going on as ride designers and operators are perhaps working out some of the bugs and trying to offer good opportunities for guests to enjoy truly immersive ride and movie experiences.
And as we think more closely about the interconnections between theme park rides and cinema or film, I think we would have to mention the existence of new technologies inside of theaters like D-Box in the US that suggest this growing connection between the technologies that are used in theaters and also those that are used in theme parks. And I think this is a case where in other cases we have the theme park borrowing from cinema. In this case, we have cinema borrowing from the theme park, because what goes on here, as you can see from this ad from D-Box, is that there's a syncing of the seats, of the movement of the seats, with what's happening on the screen. And some people have found the experience to be mixed, and in some cases maybe too visceral and too much like a theme park in terms of their movie-going experience. So certainly more to think about in the future in terms of these connections of cinema and the theme park. And so now I want to move on to another issue which is highly significant here, and this is the issue of branding. And I am back here at Universal Studios in Singapore in Sci-Fi City. And I've made a point in some of my other videos that what discouraged me a bit about this theme land is that it was primarily based on two branded properties that have connections to film, and that is Battlestar Galactica and Transformers. And in fact, it was the Transformers ride that I felt that really dominated this particular theme land. So in the era in which we exist, it's quite common then that the branded associations between the cinema and theme parks will be, of course, drawn upon. So I think in the case of a theme park, what happens is you rely on the scenes, the characters, the design elements that have already been established for you through film. And I think in some cases this can be limiting because you are forced to just focus on repetition and remaking in terms of the expectation of the film goer as he or she comes to the theme park and expects to see the same thing. And actually in this next photo you'll see exactly at Universal Studios Singapore how many of the theme lands rely on a filmic property. You have Waterworld, you have Jurassic Park, of course. Ancient Egypt doesn't directly relate to the mummy, but it's highly important and a key aspect of that branded association with the theme land. And so what happens again then in theme parks is that we are relying only on those branded properties, those previous films or animated features to create theming. And I think in some ways this gives designers some struggles with creativity because again, in a sense, your hands are tied in terms of what you can actually develop with your narrative, your storyline, your characterization, and of course the various design aesthetics that perhaps you want to apply to the theme land. I want to also mention, in terms of an earlier point about citation, that we can see other examples of citation going on here in terms of the theme lands and the theme park rides. Of course, in Universal Studios Hollywood and here in Universal Studios Singapore, we have the important property from the Mummy film, the ride Revenge of the Mummy. And so when you go through the ride, you experience then moments from the film. It could be characters, it could be key scenes, it could be exact lines of dialogue that are basically taken, lifted from the film, and then put back into the actual theme park ride. And in a sense, you could say, from a transmedia perspective, if you look at the work of Henry Jenkins, this may not be a bad thing because it could be another way to experience or expand on the story. Now, in this case here, we have a very direct allusion, and this is from the Mummy film. Here you see the scarab beetles, which I actually found the sound to be grating during my time around this ride. And this is the Treasure Adventurers ride. And again, it's recognizable, but to what extent, you know, does this cheapen the experience for the guest in terms of only relying on the most obvious of such allusions? And last, I wanted to show you the image here from Madagascar, the theme land at Universal Studios Singapore, and make the point that because of these branded properties, entire theme lands are being created that have the design aesthetics associated with the film, or in this case, the animated film. Again, I think my point is that because the branding is beginning to dominate what we see in theme parks, this may limit the ability of the storytellers and designers to tell other stories or more creative stories. So in a sense here, I would suggest that the traditions of cinema and film are somewhat shackling the abilities of designers and others to create interesting, immersive, and themed experiences within the spaces of theme parks.
So I hope you enjoyed this video feature today, looking at the movies and theme park rides in terms of their intermediality. Come back for additional video features of the Immersive Worlds Handbook.